Coming out to vote early just because I don't really want to wait in the lines come November 4th, so figured it was my day off, and here I am.
Yesterday, I believe we did 400, almost 500 voters in an 8-hour period.
I don't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning trying to get to the poll or try to get off early, and the polls close at 6. And most people in Indiana, we don't get off at 6.
We've had a United States congressman vote early, state senators vote early, state representatives vote early, mayors vote early.
Took my niece, took my sister, took my brother-in-law, took some more people, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
They had early voting in the primary in these 3 cities, Gary, Hammond, and East Chicago. And it was a unanimous vote by the board. Fast forward to the general election, and all of a sudden all the Republicans have a problem with early voting in these cities.
Chicago, Illinois, Cook County, right now they have 95 early voting stations open, and people are voting in Chicago. But in Gary, Indiana, they're saying to us, we don't want you to vote early. We want you to go to the polls election day.
According to what they have said and what we have heard is that they were afraid of vote fraud.
Voters misrepresenting who they were to election officials, filling out fraudulent forms on purpose because they were trying to vote twice or more than twice, and then showing up and committing that kind of fraud. That's voter fraud. And there's just very little evidence of that.
Indiana's a pretty strict state when it comes to voting. You can't walk in there and say, well, I'm Joe Blow. Well, let me see your ID.
It's difficult to have the vote fraud on the in-person voting because you are having to show your photo identification. 1, it has to have your photo on it. 2, your name has to conform with the voter registration record. It must have an expiration date of at least November 7th, 2006 or after, and it must be issued either by the U.S. government or the state of Indiana.
In Gary, Indiana, in the last 45 years, not one person has ever been indicted for vote fraud. So that's another smokescreen to say, we don't want you to have early voting.
And the reality is the problem of voter fraud is raised actually a lot whenever advocates argue for voting reforms that would open up the process. It's people who believe there's voter fraud think that it's a threat, and they use it often to justify not adopting reforms that would make it easier to vote.
And so now we've been in court.
We've had lots of testimony. We've been in various courts over the past several weeks.
Okay, wait a minute, let me be sure. We went to Judge Hawkins' court first. Republicans took us in there. Left Judge Hawkins' court and went to Judge Van Bocken's court. From Van Bocken's court to Arredondo's court. From Arredondo's court.
A real commitment to the right to vote would not create so many opportunities to not count ballots.
Back to Judge Hawkins' court, then to the state appellate court, 6 courts.
I assume that the legal battle will continue.
It's like playing ping pong with the voters, you know.
And then, you know, why do they just want to shut down the voting in Indiana? Why don't they shut down the voting in all the other states and everything like that? Why are they just picking on Indiana?
I think Indiana, for the first time in decades, is now, you know, a battleground state for all intensive purposes.
No Democrat has ever, in the history of this state, ever won statewide unless you win Gary in big numbers.
So they're obviously worried that early voting in these cities will increase higher turnout on the Democratic side, which obviously is not helpful to their cause.
The most people that will be shut out if they do not have the early voting will be African American people and Hispanic people that live on the north end of the county.
It's a historical election this year, and so this will probably be the biggest turnout we see.
I came out for early voting.
I voted early. I'm going to vote early because I feel there's a need for me to get out and vote. The lines are going to be long on election day.
If you have early voting, you have a lot more days to make plans with somebody or just find transportation to come out to vote.
We're not going to allow these folks to tell us we can't vote.
The other side has not proven that there's been injury, and that's really their burden of proof.
It was already mandated that we could vote early. So how you going to come in later on and say that your vote don't count?
When you tell a person they can't vote, you really stir that person up. And that person's ready now to go vote any kind of which way he can.